Welcome everyone to the Climate Resilient Stormwater Management and Expanded Flood Mitigation Program breakout room. And we'll get the slides up. We have Maya here do you want to introduce yourself and your role? Maya? Oh.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Maya Davis. I'm the climate planning lead for the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments.
Great. And I'm Jennifer Egan from the University of Maryland Environmental Finance Center, and I am facilitating and trying to get people to talk. And we also have Dawn Nixon. You are our subject matter person, as I understand?
Yes, somewhat like that. I'm Dawn Nixon with Prince George's County Department of the Environment, and I do lead the flood management group for the department, and also a member of the Climate Action Commission.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, Maya, you can go ahead and share the screen. So I just wanted to mention, as you heard, that the last breakout room is about green infrastructure. So if you really like to think more towards the nature-based solutions and green infrastructure, there's another group for that. This one is specific about stormwater flooding issues, nuisance flooding, your experience with flooding, stories you may have about being able to communicate what is going on with the county and how to, what can be done to address flooding. So it's more, and then there's also other things that you can say institutional or governmental changes via ordinances that might need to occur. And so that's what this room is about. So I just wanted to mention, the green infrastructure is another one. If you want to think about that kind of solution, that's the other room. This room is more towards the framework that needs to be in place or updated or changed in order to address flooding. Did I describe that right, Maya? Is that Maya and Dawn?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. And I want to thank everybody for joining us. So Maya, are you okay to get the slides up? Did you want me to put the slides back up?
Can you see my slides? I'm sharing my screen.
Oh.
First slide. Yeah.
That's my technical difficulty. Okay. I apologize. Great. Okay. So everybody had a chance to read this. No, I can. Yes, that was my technical difficulty. Okay. So snapshot of the efforts in the county. As this has been up, I'm not going to spend much time on this because we have a shorter amount of time in this room. And what I would like, if people can put in the chat, why you decided to join this room. Have you had flooding experiences? And I also invite you to share it verbally. What is your experience with this topic in where you live or where you work? And I'll look for raised hands. That's always, we have 25 participants. So that's what I'm trying to see everybody's face. If you want to rate, yep, go ahead, Mary Sue.
Yes, in the town of University Park where I reside, we've definitely had flooding issues. We do also have part of our park system, and I think 2 residences built on a 100-year floodplain. But one thing that I've brought up at multiple meetings, county meetings, city council meetings, is this idea of putting sensors, installing sensors that basically study and collect data on the water flowing through the watershed so that basically we can A, be keeping an eye on it data-wise, B, relate it to development. There's development everywhere. They're cutting down the woods everywhere around University Park. And I'm sure that will affect flooding. Pretty confident on that. But what if we had the data to prove it? And then what if we could hold developers accountable and say, well, if we have an increase in flooding, you need to pay for it. So that's something that I would like to encourage the county to do. And I did mention this to Galeris. She seemed interested in installing sensors. Does that make sense, what I'm trying to say?
It does. And we do have sensors installed on some of our major streams and creeks, rivers in the county.
Do you know where?
Well, we have sensors on the western branch and Upper Marlboro, northeast branch and northwest branch, and the Anacostia watershed. I believe we have sensors at all of our dams that are on various streams in the Anacostia watershed. There are about 40 gauges throughout the Anacostia and Western Branch watersheds.
Is there a plan to increase that, especially in more urban areas?
We have not looked to expanding those that network of sensors, but it's a good recommendation. So I will so note that.
Thank you.
Good. So I just mentioned in the chat, keep sharing your experiences. And so if we can move to the next slide, Maya. So here's the 3 steps or 3 action items for implementation to improve and expand the county's flood mitigation programs. So like I mentioned, this is about, what has to change with stormwater standards, guide, and code. Is there anyone that has experience with different types of, code or ordinance implementation, or is everybody pretty much new to this type of topic? And let me see if I can see people.
Yeah, so you might want to think about answering the question about what that review process looks like for permitting. Think about the types of projects or other land disturbances that you're seeing and how those projects come to fruition. And that will kind of get you to the point where you question what are those policies and regulations in place that are allowing these type of activities to occur.
Right. And I do see Lalia Riazi.
Layla, and thank
Layla.
you.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Let me remember to put my hand down. I'm bad about
Okay.
that. Yes, some of the things that I'd like to bring up is when you're looking at development where things are streamlined, that the idea is that somebody doesn't have to go through every step of the process. And you're talking about warehousing that doesn't have to go through every step of the process, including when we're talking about stormwater management, and that you're not going to be disturbing the amount of land necessary. We need to relook at that, absolutely, because it has disastrous effects on surrounding land when not every developer is required to do that level of planning for stormwater management. The other thing is to be really firm on on the paved areas within development, and is it absolutely necessary, and does it have to be impervious paving in all instances? The other thing is, when I was in the tree group before, we need to regard tree canopy coverage as not just something that's beautiful. I'm a happy tree hugger, but that it's critical to flood. It's critical to stormwater management and flood prevention and mitigation. And the other thing is looking to step away from turf. We constantly look, and even in development stuff, we're talking about turf. Turf is less permeable than holds less water than some roofing. So when we look at that, and I'm serious about that. So to look at this, and it's also to do more to facilitate conversations across the layers of stormwater management. And that means to have incentives and programs that really help residents not just address things on their own properties, but to work with their neighbors for what might be a shared stormwater management need, and that there is funding put behind 5 homeowners coming together to address a need.
Mhm.
I mean, it's great on the individual level. And I know that there is some funding or some strategies available. There needs to be a widespread opportunity for people who do not have the cash to put forward to do, to do stormwater management, that they aren't subject to a reimbursable, but instead there are bridge loans or things available so that this is not just an activity for those who have the means,
Mhm.
the immediate means.
Mhm.
So, I mean, some of those things, that are outside of the big structures of what the county is going to do, because the county is not going to be able to fix this alone.
Yeah, this is just like a lot of these problems. It's a relic legacy problem where we built things in places before we knew the science of what could happen, like flooding and the frequency of flooding. So thank you, Elliot. I'm looking for hands up. So if you have a comment on one of these 3 steps, we're pretty much touching on this first one here. There are some updates to that are proposed and some revisions and a study. Okay, Greg Smith. Oh, you're unmuted. You need to unmute, Greg, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so somebody, was it Jennifer? I don't know who it was. Jennifer mentioned something about streamlining, maybe. I don't know who did, but I've worked on attempts to gut or weaken NEPA, and it's always couched in the National Environmental Policy Act, and it's always couched in terms of streamlining. And when I've talked to grassroots environmental groups across the country way back when, I said, anytime you see streamlining, it puts you on red alert, because that's the build folks wanting to gut your ability, your due process, and gut the environmental agency's ability to play a meaningful role in environmental reviews. But going back to this, I mean, it would be great if the county would just start by paying attention to its own policies, like not to build in 100-year floodplains, pay attention to the plans and strategies that it's signed on to restore the Anacostia or the Northwest Branch, name the body of water. The county signs all these agreements and plans and then ignores the goals and the policies that are embedded in them. And I'm talking about this from experience. Honor the pieces of law that do allow early review and due process, like requiring a developer to file a conceptual stormwater management plan early on, so the local municipality and the county decision makers and the affected community could take a good hard look early on whether a project makes sense in the setting in which it's proposed. And yet, with the development project with which I'm most familiar, the planning director, without giving any kind of written rationale, exempted the developer from that requirement. And then when we raised this over and over with the planning board and district council, oh, no, we don't have jurisdiction over stormwater permits. That happened. Well, that over here was an agency that was failing to monitor, failing to enforce, and violating the Public Information Act chronically. So there are in some cases some good laws on the books and good policies. The real problem is the county decision makers routinely ignore them. And then it comes down to a test of whether or not a local group has the wherewithal to take the county to court and stay in the fight for several years. Very few do. So the reason climate change is galloping along is this kind of decision making that we see. More constructively, I'm wondering whether or not, well, that was constructive. It just wasn't super positive. We have some good laws.
That's why we're here, right? That's why we're here, Greg. We're here to try to, patch, like I said, legacy history. I don't think we indicated streamlining the process. I heard that in the solar installation, my previous one, where that permit process needs to be streamlined, which in that case, we're not dealing with skirting or making, but I don't think they're talking about streamlining. I think it's, and we can, well, okay. I want to come to Christine because she has her hands up.
I'm sorry.
That's totally fine. Everybody needs to talk about the frustrations that they've experienced for sure. Christine?
Well, the question I'd like to throw in the hopper is what the status is of the floodplain study that the county was going to enter into with the Army Corps and how that's going to dovetail with this project. It seems to inform this possibly.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, there's plenty of studies going on, especially with climate and NOAA revising information. So, okay, Christine.
Thank you. To pick off what Layla and Mary Sue had mentioned, yeah, I'm here in New Carrollton, and we're definitely having flooding issues. On any given day, you can walk down the street and see water all over the sidewalk outside different homes. One of the things I recently found out earlier from one of my former neighbors, a long timer, that this community, we have a lot of springs up under the ground. I don't know how true that is. I was going to look into it, but we're having flooding issues. And earlier this year, I had 2 people from Department of Environment to come out and to look at my issue. And of course, you know, the lack of trees is definitely a factor. This is an older community. These homes here are 50, 60 years old. So we have like the old infrastructure. But yeah, and then, you know, I guess with the excessive rain. So yeah, we're definitely having water issues here, and I'm trying to get mine resolved now.
Okay, and can you just quickly describe how you're addressing that or the resolution?
Well, I did. I had a structural engineer to come out per someone's suggestion, and he definitely said, yeah, he said, due to the excessive water we're getting, due to the climate change, and you have an older home, the outdated system, so to speak, the outdated architecture, he said that's one of the reasons why you're getting all the water to come in. We're flooded, thank God. But yeah, I do have water coming every time we get rain. I have water coming in. And I have tons, practically all of my neighbors have dealt with it or they are dealing with it.
Okay, thank you.
So Ms. Frazier, if you could, and I don't want to belabor the point because I know you have other comments, but if you'd like to put in the chat, those recommendations are, or if you're looking for recommendations to address your problem. If you're finding that there's a lack of guidance on how to address your problems from the county, that's what we want to know so that we can shape our blueprint to include those actions that will address the lack of information.
Okay.
And Jennifer or Dawn, is there any particular points that you want to make about this slide before we move to the next one? Because I'd like to start taking some notes on the screen of what's already been talked about.
Yeah, that's fine. I was gonna say, I see, Leslie, I do see your hand now. Yeah, you can move to the next slide. I just wanted to make sure everybody's knew what we're commenting on and we're well into the commenting. I agree. So hurdles for success. And we've already heard a good number of them. Leslie, yes. Make sure to unmute.
Yes, I'd like to say that the current countywide zoning does not protect our watersheds. It is a basic of stormwater management that you tree line the basic watersheds, and there's several of them in our county. Not only that, the current zoning, which is going to lay down in counter all of this, overlays development areas on wetlands, which is absurd because the county is made of sand and clay. We are a lowlands. If we don't protect the ridge lines of the breaks between streams and rivers, the floodwater management costs are going to continue to escalate. And it will be worse when we get ocean level rise with climate change. So
Right.
the current,
Yes.
if the current zoning falls down on the county, it will take at least 5 years to reverse it and correct it for climate resilience.
And that's, as you saw, part of this is not only to think about what needs to be fixed or holes filled or what, as other participants have mentioned, just kind of do what's on the books, maybe a little bit. and then add on the amount of increased and different types of storms we're having. So this is extremely challenging. So I thank you very much. And I apologize again I saw you holding up a paper and
That was the watershed. That was the watershed.
Watershed. Got it. Yes. Yeah.
Basic watershed, and they're unprotected.
Yeah.
And the loss of tree canopy cover
Yeah.
is already great.
Mhm.
And the zoning does nothing to protect any single watershed. In fact, it completely violates watershed principles. So the current countywide zoning, if it passes, will set this whole process back 5 years until we can reverse it. And by then, there already will be developments in flood zones and so on.
Yeah.
It's urgent.
Right. And I agree. The flood zone, Dawn, can you speak about the flood zone and development in the flood zone and how that occurs? I mean, I have worked in water resources, and I know that, again, before we had the science, development was there, and we have FEMA, which that's a whole other story, but can you?
Sure. So as part of the current permitting process, any area with a drainage area of 50 acres or more must go through a floodplain identification process if a floodplain has not been determined. So between the county and FEMA, we have defined the riverine floodplain along many of our creeks, watersheds, large creeks and watersheds throughout the county. So there is a process in place to identify the floodplains. Now, of course, our code does allow for there to be amendments to that floodplain for various crossing activities such as roads, stormwater management, and it does allow fill to occur in the floodplain with the understanding that that fill will be compensated with the creation of volume elsewhere. So I know that in many cases, I have heard residents indicate that there's uncertainty on their part as to whether that cut and fill is actually working in the manner in which it should theoretically work, right? And if we're losing floodplain storage and volume, well, are we then indeed creating floodplain issues downstream or to the property? So that's a long answer to your question.
Well, and thank you, because I think that's a really important part is again, how do we incorporate, it needs to be done with existing floodplain. And then as Greg is putting in the chat, thank you. We know that there's been changes, and we're going to have to accommodate more water and different patterns of flooding. So we're still talking about hurdles. There's obviously a lot. And I encourage you to raise your hand, or if there's something that you would like to see on these bullets, or of course, put it in the chat, because as I mentioned, this is all going to go into the notes that summarize what this breakout room is discussing.
And I also want everyone to be aware that the flooding, much of the flooding that we're seeing in recent past years is not riverine flooding. It's that what we call flooding, right? So it's happening outside the floodplains. Yeah.
Like more nuisance, I guess, is more used toward coastal areas. So there's different terms for just that, either the flash flooding, the smaller flooding, and then even when we say drainage issues. So there's we had one story of drainage issues, and has anyone else had experience with with experiencing, either flooding or drainage problems on their property, and what process you went through, or what hurdles did you run into in trying to address that? Because I see in the chat a lot of people experience it. Has anyone had resolution?
I have a positive story. If you want to hear it. We
Sure.
had, we'll take positive. And actually I have Prince George's County to thank. We had flooding in our basement, and we tried to get a contractor to fix it. We were not successful. And then I quickly went over to our rain check program in PG County, said, okay, I'm going to install a rain garden in my front yard and try to direct all that water somewhere else. And sure enough, it solved the problem. And the county paid for it entirely. Now, I designed it, and I put a lot of brain power into it, and I had the beauty of a slope going away from my house. I was lucky. Yeah, I can tell some people are nodding their heads. So having a good design is really key. But the other thing too is I collaborated with my neighbor. My neighbor's gutter was going directly into my corner of my house. And they said they agreed to redirect their drainage. And I gave them some heirloom tomato seeds in payment.
That's perfect.
That's
Anyway,
great.
and
Neighborly relations, right?
Exactly. A little tomato seed goes a long way.
Yeah, and with individual problems, so that's where, and I see two hands up, and Doug and Christine, I apologize, I didn't see who came up first, but Dawn, do you want to, so small homeowner assistance like that, I know.
Right. So we do offer a rain check rebate program. I don't know how many residents are aware of that, which provides rebates for the type of best management practices, such as the one that Mary Sue just described, right? So if you install a rain barrel, if you put a rain garden on your property, if you plant a tree, we will offer you a rebate for employing those types of practices on your property. The rain check rebate focus, however, is on water quality improvement, but the certain practices, or most of those practices, do have an element of flood quantity control. So
like the smaller amounts, just, a rain garden so small, it can take, a small amount, but it might help that standing water in a yard. And that might be more in the green infrastructure. They might be discussing that, but I want to, since we're talking about these drainage issues, there's obviously overlap with solutions. Okay. Doug Bowles. If you're muted, make sure to unmute.
Hi, everyone. I had forgotten I raised my hand and I wasn't going to speak, but since you called on me, I'll consider it fate.
I apologize.
I apologize. I live in Colmar Manor. I'm actually one of the council members here, recently elected, and this is a passionate subject of mine. A large portion of our community is in the floodplain. How often are they communicated with by the county to remind them that they are in a floodplain? I know the city, of course, the town has a responsibility for that, but we have a lot of folks adding hardscape, adding structure, particularly parking structures here. They are unconcerned with the potential contribution they are making to the flooding situation.
Wait, what?
So the question I'm asking is, over and above what the town's responsibility is, which we are working on, how often are people in the floodplain communicated with and offered opportunities to perhaps make better choices or be made aware of things like rebates and so forth?
Their mortgage company probably tells them they're in the floodplain and they need to get flood insurance. I apologize. And Raya, I don't know if you know, we're supposed to be leaving, which I thought we had at least 10 more minutes. That's what I had on my timer. So Christine, right now it's telling us we have 76 seconds, and I thought we had 10 more minutes. But Christine, do you want to make your comment?
It'll probably take more time than that, but I'm just going to add to the blueprint. Again, someone already put up here, I believe, like the advocacy and educating, probably not just the neighbors or residents, but also, again, we need to take it to the top, the buy-in from the county, because they really can't address something that they're not aware of, and then put maybe some resources in place to help people
Mhm,
going on, especially for the older communities.
mhm, mhm. Because that's where the problems are. They might have been built, again, before all of the federal laws happen.
Right.
Okay, we have 32 seconds. I apologize. I thought I was taking my time. Mary Sue, do you want to have?
Yes, some people are asking me where all the information on the rain check program. And it looks like Dawn just posted the link. Go ahead, go get them.
Yay.
I was
And if there's-
completely $1,400. I used all native plants. Native is the way to go. And it's now a beauty to behold.
Wonderful. And